From our studios in the Southern Food and Beverage Museum in New Orleans, welcome to our special Louisiana Eats podcast series, Tammany Taste Quick Bites. I'm Poppy Tooker. David Blossman is a man ahead of his time. Long before it was legal for him to drink, David was experimenting with home brewing, making small batches of beer as a hobby. At 17 years old, he invested his teenage savings into what would become the Abita Brewing Company. Over 30 years later, he's now the president. We spoke with David about Abita's pioneering role in the craft beer movement and the special relationship between Abita and both the North Shore and Greater New Orleans communities. David Blossman, what an honor to have you here in our Louisiana Eats studios.
Well, the honor is all mine.
Well, I guess today it's Louisiana Eats and Drinks, huh?
Yeah.
Well, back in 1986, certainly not in Louisiana, but even broadly across the United States, there wasn't really a craft beer thing happening.
No, and it wasn't called craft until many years later. Really, we just were better local. That's what we're going for. And we're really trying to bring fresher style of import beers that people couldn't get here in Louisiana and then put our own kiss or signature on that. And we did that.
What was your impetus? How did this start?
Well, Abita started with two home brewers, Rush Cummings and Jim Patton, that had a passion for their hobby, which was brewing beer. I also had a passion for that at a younger age. And when I heard that a brewery was opening up in my backyard, I was like, wow, I got to be a part of this.
What were you doing at the time?
I was in high school. I guess what happened for me is I joke about it, but I was a big tennis player. And in eighth grade, I was on the varsity tennis team. And they found out I was at a conference, and the football team got in trouble for being out of district. I'm sorry. So like it was a private school, but you have to live within a certain geographical area, or the team, you had to sit out a year. And so they're like, well, you got to sit out. And I guess I started doing other things.
Other things caught your attention. Huh?
Yeah, they did. But in Louisiana, things were different back then, and hopefully my kids aren't listening to this podcast.
How do you go from there to becoming president of Abita Beer?
Well, I went on and graduated high school. And went
That's always good.
Yeah, that's good. Louisiana State University. And I was going to major in some sciences, but I sat in my first chemistry class, and there was about 300 or 400 people there. And I'm like, I dropped that class as fast as a bad check, man. It was So I went to my aptitude, which was math. Actually, I was pretty good in science, but chemistry, I just wasn't. It didn't make sense to me. The rules didn't. Anyway, I was going to go to brewmaster school in Europe and do that and learn another language. And I just figured, let me stick with what my family does. And I'm going to go in accounting, and I'm a major in accounting. And that's what I did. I come up from a long family history of entrepreneurship and businesses and things like that. And so I did that, and I worked. My first job was in New Orleans at Ernst & Young, One Shell Square, and I worked at public accounting a couple of years, and then I worked for the Diefenthal family at Southern Holdings and Southern Scrap, and then Abita was growing, and Jim and Rush did a great job, and they needed help, and so I came in December of '96 and started running the company.
So how old was the company at that time?
10 years.
Ah.
It's been an adventure ever since, and it is my passion, and I love it. And I'm very lucky to do something like you that you love to do so much. Because I tell people, like, you don't have to worry about motivating yourself or any employee, or your team members when they love what they do. You're not, saying, oh, God, I got to work today. No, you can't wait to get to work.
Exactly.
And it helps when you got great coffee.
Richard McCarthy from Slow Food USA likes to say here in New Orleans, we were slow before anybody told us it was a good thing to be. And Abita Beer was craft beer before we knew that craft beer should exist in the world.
It's true. Like a lot of trends, they start on the coast and work themselves in. And, when Abita started brewing in 86, we're actually founded in 85. We say 86 because what does it matter? Paperwork means nothing, right? It's that physical part of brewing and selling beer. And so there really weren't that many of them. I don't remember off the top of my head, but there might have been like 8. We might have been one of the first 10 or something. Certainly that's in existence today.
Yeah.
That started up. And so, in the South, East, it were by far the first one. I wasn't even close.
How did that go with the state regulations? Did you all have to carve the way with that?
We just followed what rules that were there and figured them out. And sometimes we stumbled and sometimes we didn't. But the regulators are really cool with working with us. They weren't out to get us or anything like that. They were out to support us and help us as they are today, really. Maybe they were learning and we were learning too.
Yeah.
Let's dust off these pages and figure out, what the law really states. And it's not too cumbersome. There's a lot of taxes involved for sure. That's our biggest cost.
That's where your good numbers background comes in great.
Yeah. So, but, brewing, I love brewing.
Do you still brew at home?
I haven't brewed at home in quite a while. I tried to get my nephews involved in it probably about 10 years ago, and that was the last home brew I did. It's just so much easier when you talk to the brewmaster and the brewers and you say, well, I want it to taste like this and do that. And every once in a while I'll make a recipe up myself, and it's easier to let them do it. And I have much better brewers than I am. And, Mark Wilson's our brewmaster, born and raised in New Orleans, and he's fantastic. And he's got a great group of people too. And we're doing 3 or 4 test brews a week. So we're constantly trying new things. And that's the homebrew spirit in us, is we always want to try new things and do things differently. And it just drives us to think about things like that. That's not the best business model. The best business model would be to stick to 1 or 2 brands, get behind them, and market them and do a great job with them. And that's really the import model. But that's not the craft spirit. That we're adventurous and we want to try new things.
No wonder you love going to work every day.
Yeah, exactly.
What fun is that? So from those early days, what beers are now your standards?
Well, our number one beer is Amber, and it's a beautiful amber lager, and it was the first beer we ever brewed. And that and Golden, which we discontinued about 2 years ago. We really thought when we started out that Golden, which was a continental lager, which is more like the fresh tasting European beer that you could get here, we thought that's going to be our number one beer. But, it had a difference in that it was fresh and probably a little more maltier, and, which helped out with Louisiana cuisine. But it wasn't a huge point of difference. Where Amber, that was a radical beer back then. People talk about radical beers now, 10+% alcohol and whatever, hoppy and bitter and whatever, aged in, cognac barrels, whatever.
Right.
So, but you got to look back then. That was kind of extreme because it was so different. And it really was designed to go so well with our cuisine. It's so versatile. It's malty, but it is balanced. There is some bitterness, but just enough to balance out the sweetness so it goes down smooth. And for beer about 130 calories, you will never get more bang for your buck calorie-wise. And it really offsets really spicy or rich dishes very, very well. It stands the test of time. It's still our number one beer.
I don't think anybody was even thinking about pairing beer and food back then.
Well, coming from Louisiana, you have to do that. It's part of our social, heritage, right? We sit down to a meal and we like to enjoy it with friends and family. And it's not a holiday setting. It's a backyard barbecue. It's tailgating. And, we tailgate. There's food involved, right? Great food.
Right.
It's a gumbo cook or a crawfish boil. It's clubbing. It's all those things. And it also fine dining. It needs to stand on its own on a table. And I think beer really, really does well. Fine beer is great on a table because it really has a lot going for it. The carbonation in itself is great with food because it scrubs the tongue of oils and lifts it kind of like a champagne would do and leaves you ready to taste again. And, wine can't do that. And look, I like wine, don't get me wrong. But, people always say wine and cheese pairings. I always laugh because it's like, the cheese sticks on your tongue, at least fatty cheeses, which I like the best. Yeah. And it does nothing to remove that off your tongue so you can really enjoy some more tastings of the liquid and the cheese. But beer does that. And, I've one who always suffered with heartburn since high school. And it's not as low in pH as some other forms of alcohol. And certainly so versatile from the different flavors of, blonde beers to dark beers to amber beers and all the different intricacies that you have on the brewing method, the ingredients, the hopping and bitter levels, the sweet, the sour. I mean, there's so much spectrum there that, when you actually look at the flavor wheel, that is used to describe wine and those to describe beer, the beer flavor wheel is about 30% larger than the wine one.
Incredible.
And we don't make things up either. Oh, this was grown on, I could taste the tobacco.
Oh, I know it's not all fussy quite like that.
And, look, again, I got nothing wrong with wine. I drink wine. I like wine. But, we do drink our wine. We don't spit it out. And that always got me when we were, in the beginning, we were with a lot of wine and spirits distributors because that's who would take us. And they'd sit around, you go to a meeting, hold on for a second, we're tasting wines. And they swish it and spit it out. I'm like, that's good stuff. Don't spit it out. It's made for drinking.
So you've got the golden, used to have it, got the amber, still a absolute stalwart of the business. Tell me what happens over this next period of time.
After amber and golden, the next beer that we made that was new was Turbo Dog. And we had a English brewer come over with an old dog ale recipe that he wanted to brew. And we're like, okay, we'll make a one-off for our birthday party. Honestly, I don't remember what year it was. Probably 1990, I'm thinking, or 89, something like that. And so we brew it. It's a lot more robust and stronger than his old dog. And, in drinking it, like, oh, this isn't an old dog. This thing, we're talking about it. And we're going to call it the Hammer because if you drank enough of it, it gave you a hammer headache. And then, or it'd hammer you. And because back then, a 5.6% alcohol beer was a very strong beer. And finally, somebody said, you got to think of the times back then. Well, this ain't no old dog. This thing's turbocharged. And then we have Turbo Dog. And so, Turbo Dog's a great, robust brown ale. And again, it's got a lot going on with it, but it's perfect for some of our food here. Great beer, still make it today. And then one of the next, bigger beers that we have around now is Purple Haze. That was really inspired. Again, we wanted to make at first a raspberry stout, and we kept trying, and we're like, the amount of raspberries you have to put in the raspberry stout was just ridiculous. So we made a wheat beer base, which is, golden and light in color and a lot of wheat protein in it. It makes it a little hazy. And it was just, a beautiful light beer that we added fresh raspberry puree that we're getting from Oregon. And we're like, wow, the acidity from the natural fruit and the sweetness really added something to the wheat beer. And it added pop, like a little tinginess to your tongue. And that tartly sweetness really came through, and a great aroma came through in it. And we're adding the raspberries, and it would swirl around, and we're like, that's like a purple haze going on. And like, it wasn't like we were trying to copy Jimi Hendrix. I'm not saying that wasn't.
You didn't hear it in the background?
I think subliminally that probably was the case. But that's how it came out. And we're like, purple haze, and so
great name, David.
And it was just came from the heart, and we ran with it, and it was something that was only offered, every once in a while. Then it was offered all the time on draft, and it just kept growing and becoming popular. And then we're like, we got to bottle this. So we have, and it's our second largest beer.
And was it perhaps from your experiment with the raspberries, or at what point did you decide to expand into the fruity seasonal beers that you all do today? Because you can always tell, Frank Brightston likes to talk about how we have 4 seasons here that are different. We've got oysters, crawfish, shrimp, and crabs. Those are our 4 seasons.
Yeah.
And you all really highlight both those foods and our seasons with the things you all do in seasonal beers.
Well, yeah, especially our harvest line, and that's where we use Louisiana produce in our beers. And we started out with strawberry lager, and the idea there was, we were going to be in a strawberry festival. And we're like, well, let's make it with some Ponchatoula strawberries. And
my goodness, Abita is like almost shares a border with Ponchatoula.
Exactly.
Y'all are like kissing cousins.
That's right.
I think there's probably some strawberries growing around the brewery somewhere, huh?
Yeah, well, in listening to my family's stories, now, you don't know how much is true and how much is legend, but there was a sea captain that was on my grandmother's side that supposedly brought strawberries to Louisiana, and from, I don't know where he was, somewhere in Central America or something, they were growing them, and he brought them, and the family in Ponchatoula started growing them. Now, again, truth, fiction, I don't know. Just some little boy hearing the stories. So that was planted in the back of my head, and then so we're like, let's go to Strawberry Festival with strawberry beer. And we had like a deal with them. Hey, if we outsell whatever with this, we'll get more distribution. And we did with it. And we're like, people were just asking us more and more about it. And we started out with, I bought a little wine press, and I made a little wine when I was in college and stuff. But, this was, I knew how to press stuff. So I got the press and we were pressing it. And I'm like, you know what? We're going to make more than I can physically do with a wine press. So luckily, we got Henry Amato, who has a great distillery outside a meat area, I guess, in Louisiana. And he was already pressing strawberries, and he knows a lot more about the berries and the growers, and grows a lot himself. So we get him to do it for us, and it's so good with the wheat beer base that we put it in, that again, the natural fruit makes a difference. It gives you aroma, but it also gives you that tartly sweet flavor in it. And it's not as tart as a raspberry. It's not as sweet as a raspberry. It's just something different. And then from that, we would just decided somewhere down the line of the popularity of the strawberry, it was so popular, we couldn't make it year round. And we didn't have the capability to do that. And we're like, well, let's make, a blueberry beer. Let's make a Satsuma wit. Let's make a grapefruit honey.
Satsuma wit is a brilliant thing. That is a brilliant thing.
It was a great beer. People loved it. And we stopped making it. They just got so upset with us. But we like trying new things, and we got to make room for that.
It's part of the fun.
Yeah, it's part of the fun.
And then those old beers just become a legend.
They do, and you can always bring them back. Dust them off and come back, and we've been in business long enough that you could do those kind of things, and so it grew into our harvest lineup, and we're very happy with it, and people seem to enjoy it, and. Strawberry is still our number one, harvest line, and we'll sell about 200,000 cases in 3 months. So it's still big. The other ones we're lucky might do that all together, all the other three. Ponchatoula has a long history of being a great producer of strawberries, and I think they're fantastic because they're not as big as California ones. They're smaller, but I think they have more flavor and are sweeter. And
they do.
You bite in them, they're not all white. You actually see the red coming through to them. And they used to be enjoyed in other parts of the country. I mean, they used to bring them up the rail line up to Chicago and other areas, and it was a big growing industry here for a long time.
How do you all dream these things up? I love this idea of you all being the big operation that you are, with this flexibility of always wanting to try new things. And part of it has to do with the magic of your tasting room and people being able to come and visit your facility, right?
No doubt. And it's our best way to interact with our fans. And that's what you see is like a lot of locals bring in friends from out of town there. That's mainly what we have. And it's good to get the perspective of our local fan and those that haven't tried it yet, or those that are a fan from out of town and can't wait to get there. And so there's a lot of energy there. Mm-hmm. And so, we love that. And we show them a good time, show them the place and give a great tour and sit around and taste great beer. I mean, our homebrewing background and our adventureness, in Louisiana, we love cooking new things too. So you marry our culture with the homebrew spirit and love for making great beers. We want to do those things. And to see that backed up, like you're saying, in our tasting room and in other bars and restaurants, and get feedback almost instantaneously on, I like that, I didn't like this. And it drives us to what, we want to please people. Certainly, we do make our beer and drink it and sell the rest. I mean, there's a truth to that, Each employee gets 2 cases a week, and
Oh, that's great.
So, but that's really for sharing with friends and family. I hope people aren't drinking 2 cases themselves, but anyway.
They're stashing it. They're cellaring it, right?
They do. They actually do, and they build it up for crawfish balls and things like that for family and friends. But I digress, which I usually do. Getting that feedback instantaneously from fans in our tasting room is very, very important. And also with our social media channels and stuff, that our fans tell us, and we like that. And we have a good, tight relationship, and we follow them. If they really like this or want to go another direction, we think about it. We really do value their input.
How far and wide do your fans extend these days? How far does Abita go in the United States?
We're in most of the states. We're in about 38 or 40 of the continental states. We're in Puerto Rico. We're in some European countries. We're in England. I just went there with my son and wife, and my other son was on a school trip there, so we met up with him. But went to Shake Shack and had a Abita root beer in London, so gotta love that. And that direct flight out of New Orleans, that's doing Europe right, I have to tell you. Once they had that, I was like, I got to do it. My son was over there playing soccer on an exposition game over there. And so my other son loves Chelsea. So we went to see a Chelsea game and drink a Abita root beer at Shake Shack. So.
Oh, that is so exciting. What about the root beer? Tell me how you all go from being hardcore beer brewers to being soft beer brewers.
Well, John Warren, who still works for Abita, he would run our bottle shop, and he came from a soft drink background. He was always asking, "You got to make a root beer. You got to make a root beer." And we're like, "Okay, John, we'll make it." We made it. We're like, "Damn, that's good." And really, what we liked about it, it was a way for a father and a son to sit down and share a beer together legally, and have a long session with it. And I do that today with my kids, and. You could see all the crazy stuff we come up with our soft drink side. That's my kids telling me, "Hey, you got to make a king cake soda." Well, we make one, and things like that, and pecan pie, and so it's just fun to get them involved and to really make soda the way it used to be made, which is on the hot side. You used to brew a soda. And it wasn't all cold mixing, getting a syrup and adding carbonated water and, bottling it. We actually brew it. So we take only Louisiana cane sugar. We add it with other ingredients and brew it and heat it up. And you know what happens with sugar. You start cooking it, it caramelizes a little bit, right? It adds depth of flavor and creaminess. And so it's something that's great and it's all natural. And we enjoy it. It does well. We sell about 12,000 barrels a year of root beer, which would make us probably the number 2 brewer in the state.
How much do you believe it's really in the water?
There's a lot to it, believe it or not. Beer's biggest ingredient is water. And there's certain things that have to happen from a microbiological standpoint that you have to sustain life, right? You have enzymes that need to convert starches to sugar. And you have yeast that need to eat sugar and turn it into alcohol and CO2. So you have to support that life. You also have to have the right mineral content and the right pH, but it has to taste good, right? And so a lot of people don't realize that brewing water just doesn't come from the ground for the vast, vast majority of breweries in the world. And we're very lucky in our anomaly industry. We take it straight from our deep artesian wells into the process, no alterations. We don't change it and put it straight into the process. And it is a signature to our beers. The water is very wet. It's not a hard water. It's a soft water. And it really gives us kind of a signature to it. And certainly we could add salts and we could add calciums and add acids to it to change it up and try to make something different. But we stick to what God gave us, which is this perfect, pristine water that we like to use. And we think it does a great job with our beers.
I mean, how long has Abita Springs been famous for their water? I mean, this is a tradition that goes back generations and generations.
It goes back to yellow fever. I mean, there's no doubt about that. People would get sick in the city and they go to Abita Springs to try to recoup and drink the well water. And they didn't know, I think, at one point whether it was the water or the ozone in the environment. Now, ozone used to be a good thing. They used to call it the ozone belt,
yes.
And now I think people think differently. But anyway, it was healthy air and healthy water. And, you go back to the Indians that founded Abita Springs. It's a great place.
It's a great place. And you all certainly make it a great place. I mean, nowadays, if you're escaping the yellow fever, you have the choice between beer and water. It's really a great alternative on the North Shore. Aside from making really great beer, you guys are really great members of the community, and you're just great neighbors to have. Tell me about some of the things that you all do at Abita to ensure that.
Well, we've count ourselves very lucky to be very well received in the community and supported. And we wouldn't be here today without that great support. And so we feel like we got to give back in times of need. And we started doing charitable brews right after Hurricane Katrina and Rita. It devastated our area. In fact, we were down and weren't operating for a couple weeks. And as we were recuperating, we were like, we got to do something. So we did what we knew how to do best, which is make great beer. And so we made Restoration Pale Ale, and we donated $1 from every 6-pack sold. And we ran that for a number of years, and we raised $660,000 that we gave to the people that were affected in this area. I mean, some people that's not a lot of money. For us, it was certainly at the time. We were about 45,000 barrel brewery, and today we're about 130,000 barrel brewery. So I mean, it was a big thing for us, and that led us to other charitable brews that we've done. And we did something with the Abbey and raised over $100,000 to help with their facilities and
St. Joseph's Abbey, of course.
Yes, yeah. And then we did the SOS beer, and we were again raised over $600,000 for those affected by the oil spill, and that helped direct fishermen and restaurateurs and people that were hurting. And then, as that phase went out, we were helping use our funds for the environment and to help stop coastal erosion, which is a big thing in our area. And we're sportsman's paradise, and we want to keep care of the fisheries and the way of life here, and stopping that saltwater intrusion and also the degradation of our wetlands is important to us. We want to make sure that we're a good neighbor and a good environmental steward. And so when we go to do things, we've always been one about efficiency. Why waste things? And so as we do things and grow, we have the luxury of being able to afford a more efficient and also goes hand in hand a more environmentally sound equipment. And so we'll lead the world in some of those things. We were one of the first Merlin brew houses back in 1990 that was started up, and it was a different way of boiling the wort, unfermented beer, and it used about 70% less energy. And it was huge. And so, and we think it made it more elegant, really great with lagers. It really did a great job with our lagers. We took a chance with Krohn's, which is a group out of Germany, and their brew house technology called Steinecker systems. And they had a new technology coming out called Equitherm. And it's very efficient brew houses. And again, we use less energy there. And we actually, one of the only breweries in all the Americas that uses recovered energy to actually heat up our mash. So our brew house is very, very efficient, and I think it's probably the most efficient in all the Americas. If not, it's up there in the top 2 or 3. I don't know if they added more Equitherm systems since us in America. So, but at that time, we were the first Equitherm system, which is a new technology. Makes great beer, and we have less of a footprint. And we've done other things like our wastewater. We pre-treat it before it goes to a larger municipal system. And we wanted to make sure that we were making it around household quality or strength effluent. And so we looked at different technologies, and we went with an anaerobic system and a low rate system. So we have over 550,000 gallons of our waste that goes through a process anytime with about a 7-day retention. And what we're able to do is ferment that, and we produce methane gas, which is natural gas, that we clean up and use to run one of our boilers. So we are making 25% of the gas that we use. Incredible. And that's just from the byproduct that we would normally send downstream to be treated. At the time, we were the largest commercial installation of solar panels. And we did that, on top of my head, 4 or 5 years ago. And it's great. It provides us, it's not a lot, but it's some, it's 2 to 5% of our electricity, but it's a lot of units up there. I'll tell you that. The depth of beauty here in Louisiana is unreal. And we want that to be here for further generations. And that's why we do that.
The growth that you all have experienced in profile, in distribution, in everything. I mean, you all have just become a giant in the industry in many ways.
Well, we're still very small in comparison to the larger brewers, but I hear what you're saying. There's no doubt. We're a top 20 craft brewer in the United States, and we don't have the population background like, if we were somewhere in the West Coast in a big city or, in a bigger southern city like let's say Houston or Dallas or Atlanta. I mean, you look at our market share, you go, wow, we'd be this big. But we are a success story, but it's not me. I mean, it's the idea, it's the people, it's the team, it's the location.
It's the beer.
It's the water. I mean, there's a lot of, things behind it. And we're not one to pound our chest and, pat ourselves on the back. We just like doing what we're doing. And that in itself is our own reward. But when people enjoy it, that's it. And we would not be here today if it wasn't for the culinary industry really taking us under their wings and putting us on the table and seeing our vision and really pushing us in the right direction and helping us out so much. In the beginning, our beers were all over the place, and they just were from batch to batch. They were different. Wanting to try and experiment with us with new things and being patient with us, that was very important, and I'm very thankful for that.
That was David Blossman, president of the Abita Brewing Company. Our North Shore friends at Abita are at it again. Their latest creation is a light IPA brew dubbed Hop 99. That's because this full-flavored beer weighs in at only 99 calories and 2.7 carbs. Hop 99 just might be your new favorite beer to enjoy with meals. Ever given any thought to how beer pairs with food? Abita's Amber beer is perfect with the smoked foods we love in South Louisiana. Andouille and amber beer? A marriage made in heaven. While Andy Gator is great with fried foods, what about beer for dessert? Purple Haze is a perfect partner for light fruit desserts and salads, while some like it with chocolate. Me? Just put a scoop of vanilla ice cream in mine, and I'll call that dessert. And another thing about food and beer, although box stocks have become a wonderful addition to everyone's pantry, I've found that while many Americans don't keep stock on hand, they usually do have a beer in the fridge. If you need just a little liquid in a recipe, light beers are a great substitute for chicken stock, and dark beers can sometimes be used instead of beef stock. Basically, any liquid is preferable to just adding water. So pop the top on that brew and see what it can do for your gravies. One of my favorite beef stews is something I call Creole carbonades. It combines great Louisiana eats like stale French bread, Zatarain's Creole mustard, and Turbo Dog, my favorite cooking beer from Abita. You'll find the recipe at poppytooker.com and at louisiananorthshore.com. Big thanks to our sponsor, the St. Tammany Parish Tourist Commission. Located just 40 minutes from New Orleans' French Quarter, the North Shore's Tammany Taste features the chefs and farmers, brewers and bakers of St. Tammany Parish's culinary scene. Visit louisiananorthshore.com to discover more. Louisiana's North Shore, where New Orleans has come to play and get away for more than a century. Don't miss a delicious Tammany Taste Quick Bite by subscribing to our podcast at poppytooker.com, where you'll also find lots more recipes and delicious food ideas, too. Louisiana Eats original theme music by Johnny Sketch and the Dirty Notes. Thanks to senior producer Joe Schreiner, who produced this podcast. I'm Poppy Tooker. Thanks for listening. This Louisiana Eats Quick Bite was produced by Poppy Tooker Broadcasting.